Hi, everyone. Well, we wanted to welcome you to the webinar today. We'll go ahead and get started. The webinar is the Threat Triage webinar, where we'll walk you through how to analyze a malware sample. And Luis, one of our senior security analysts within the Security Operations Center, will be presenting and walking you through that today. So I'll go ahead and transfer it over to Luis, and he can get us started.
All right. Hello, everybody. So my name is Luis Saenz. I am a senior security analyst for Datashield, and I'll be talking about how Datashield analyzes a malicious file in a sandbox environment. Now, before we get deep into the hunting weeds and stuff, let's first start off with what is an incident response plan. And it's not just merely a list of steps. It's more like a roadmap for the organization's incident response program. And it will include short and the long-term goals, any metrics for measuring success, training, any job requirements for the incident response roles. Now, the nice thing about it is that the whole thing is specific to your company. Now, this model here on the right is for the NIST. That's the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And it has 4 phases. The first one is preparation. The second one is detection and analysis. The third is containment, eradication, and recovery. And then last but not least is post-incident activity. Now, during the presentation, we'll talk about all of these phases briefly, but the main focus is going to be on phase 2 for detection and analysis. Now, for detection, we have our main tool, which is Shield Vision. And for analysis, we'll cover some of the other tools that we can also use during our investigations on a normal day. All right, so let's start off with phase 1, preparation. So as a cyber threats are just constantly an issue, it's important for organizations to implement a plan to identify and protect themselves from potential attacks. We have training, which it's important to consider that it includes regular employees and also cybersecurity staff, if you have any, and also make sure that you get all the right resources. Getting all the policies and procedures, defining the scope, to whom and to what it applies to, and under what circumstances. Team members will be organizational structure, defining of roles, any responsibilities, any levels of authority, and documentation. This is one of the big items here. It's requirements for reporting for different types of incidents. It will have certain guidelines for, let's say, external communications, what can be shared to whom and when and over what channels. And if there are like any specific escalation points for the incident or that kind of stuff. All right, so detection, there's many different attack vectors, and it's important to try to cover all of them if possible in the incident response plan. Now, an attack vector is a method that cyber criminals use to breach or infiltrate a network. We have external removable media, which is an attack that can be executed from a peripheral device. For example, a malicious code that was spreading from an infected USB. We have attrition, which is an attack that employs brute force methods to comprise, degrade, or destroy systems. For example, denial of service that's meant to impair or deny access to service, or I guess an application could be as well. We have attrition, which is just an attack that employs brute force methods. It could be for authentication mechanisms such as passwords, captchas, digital signatures. We have web attacks. This could be from a web application. For example, we have cross-site scripting attacks that use to steal credentials, or it can be used to redirect to a site that exploits a browser's vulnerability. We have emails. This can be an attack that's executed disguised as an attached document, or it could also be that it has a link to a malicious website somewhere in the body of the email. We have impersonation, which is an attack involving replacement or something benign with something malicious. So, for example, we can have spoofing, man-in-the-middle attacks. We can have SQL injections. We have improper usage. So this is just any incident that will be resulting from a violation of an organization's acceptable usage policy. So it could be, for example, if a user installs a file sharing software or performs some sort of illegal activities. All right, so as previously mentioned, we use Shield Vision as one of our main tools for detecting threats and malware in customers' environments. It can ingest information from any tool for faster process and quicker results. And we like to divide it into two. So we have alerts, which is a replay of a previously created query, which scans a client's environment on a set interval. So for example, we have admin group modifications, user account creation or deletion. We have port scanning, etc. And then we have scans, which is also known as threat hunting. So threat hunting combines the use of human talent and engineering to seek out those indicators of compromise. The analysts will familiarize themselves with an organization environment and are able to effectively filter out key events that need to be examined a little bit closer. Now, we can also find possible targets and then interpret patterns around the attack. And scans are usually created by analysts who usually do proactive scanning through security research to hunt down malicious activity or any indicators of compromise. Now, the nice thing about it is that we can have any time frame for these. We can run it, for example, for a day, a week, a month, or any time that we feel is needed. And these scans are nice for any new vulnerabilities or security notifications, any new CVEs, that kind of stuff. All right, analysis. So some of the things that we like to consider when it comes to analyzing threats is make sure we have profiling, event correlation, OSINT, malware environments. So for profiling, this is a measure of characteristics that are expected activity, where we can review and validate checksums. We can check for potential malicious domains or IPs, any network communications over clear text protocols. As an example, we have semantic auto-protect scans. We have any information being sent over FTP or SMB telnet. Now, for event correlation, we have association of network sessions with log events, firewalls. We have permitted and denied connections. We have logon activity from hosts, from IPs. We have information from VPN, RDP, and we try to make sure that everything is connected and we have all the information for you. And then we have OSINT, which is just going to be identifying the reputation of the domains, the IPs, any file names, the checksums. We can always add web page screenshots or antivirus results. And we have, last but not least, malware environment. So this is just going to be a place where we can replay events, download files from URLs, any things that we believe will spawn any suspicious processes, any object codes, or anything that is not something we want on our regular network. All right, for this case study, we're going to have 4 different tools. I'm going to briefly explain what they are. So Fiddler is a tool for web applications, and it captures the network between the internet and the sandbox environment computers. And it's going to help us inspect all of the traffic inbound and outbound. We have PE Studio. This is a tool for advanced users, programmers that allows you to peek inside Windows executable PE files. And PE is just portable executable. These files are commonly seen in Windows operating systems. And PE Explorer can handle a bunch of different files, for example, EXEs, DLLs, SCRs, others as well. We have Process Hacker. This will monitor system resources, performance statistics, any network connections, CPU speed, memory use, any start times. And we have Rexshot. This will be a snapshot of the Windows registry before and after we interact with malware. So that's obviously pretty handy. All right, so for today, we have Pony Stealer. I know it has a bunch of different other names, I guess. One of them is Fair IT, or I don't know. These malwares tend to have funny names sometimes, so I try not to mess them up too badly. So Pony Stealer is actually been around since a very, very long time around. So it was back first seen in 2011. That's a long time for security. Anyways, it's considered a Trojan, and it's one of the most prevalent stealers out there, even more than like Loki or the Keybase. And in this case, it only applies to any Windows machines that are out there, which, as we know, are still quite a bit. So this malware, within a small amount of time, became a botnet, and it was able to steal millions of sets of credentials. Its main threat vectors are through email, iframe, and advertisements. So we consider this to be a good case study for you guys. All right, so this is the timeline and the IOCs, but I'm calling this slide a little bit of a cheat sheet, if you will, because I'm going to go through all of these indicators of compromise in a minute, but I wanted to show you this slide so that you could have an idea of what we're about to see in the next few slides, and so that when you see it, you can also identify it. I'm going to give it a second there. Okay. All right, so this tool for this screenshot is called Netwitness. And Netwitness is a platform that will accelerate threat detection and response by collecting data across different capture points. So it'll have logs, packets, NetFlow, endpoints, all of that can be ingested here. And in this particular screenshot, as you can see, there's a malicious domain, and I highlighted it in green. It was also on the IOCs, if you remember. However, there's other things that we can consider when we're threat hunting. So, for example, we want to make sure that we're looking at IPs, user agents, and anything that might be helpful in the investigation. So, in this case, the customer is using HTTP referrer. In other words, this is the header that identifies the address of the site, which is linked to the resource connected. So if you check the referrer, it will display where the request originated from. Most common situations for this is when there's a user who clicks on a link, and then the browser sends the request to the server holding the destination web page. Now, for some of you paying attention, referrer is actually misspelled. It's missing an R. So it's just a side note, but I think it's funny that this misspelling is set in stone because it was incorporated to the request for the RFC 1945 standard. So I guess we're just going to be stuck with that referrer being misspelled. All right. So as many as you know, when you download something from the internet or an email, perhaps, it goes to the downloads folder. In this case, it's not any different. It was here. So we went ahead and actually executed this. And as you can remember, we're going to use a couple of different tools to analyze this. And it's just to show you different parts in different areas. This was all done in a sandbox. So it's a safe environment, which we can run all the executables so we can try to capture all the changes that it did. All right, so our first tool here is Rexshot, and it's not quite a print screen of the tool, but this is some of the very important information that we got from there. We have, well, it helped us identify the location of the executable, the inet cache locations, and it also helped us locate all the unapproved registry modifications. Now, if you look at the first file in the middle, kind of sort of, it says files added is 1,039. And then there's files deleted 275, files modified 471, folders added, folders deleted. Anyways, overall, the total changes is 6,972, which, if you ask me, is quite a bit. Now, this is actually a print screen from Rexshot. Now, keep in mind that what we saw in the previous slide, that was almost 7,000 changes. That's hard to find all on your own. So this tool is nice and handy. It tells us everything. And the first stat on the other slide was files added. This is where you're able to output those changes to an HTML, which is on the right. And as you can see here, there's also another executable that was not supposed to be on this machine. Now, I'm not sure how much you can see it because it's a little bit small, but it's the kip1.exe. And this was able to tell us all the places it was in and all the changes. So very handy. All right, let's move on to Process Hacker. This tool helped us provide the antivirus scan reputation. It confirmed that the executables were malicious, and it helped us locate the associated library as well. Now, keep in mind, once a computer is infected, Pony runs in the background, collecting the information about the system, the network activity, and the users that are currently connected to it. So it's also common for malware to load other types of malwares onto the system target to be used to steal credentials or just to throw you off base. All right, this is still Process Hacker, just a different screen. And I want to bring this up because it helps by highlighting things for you. So some of the options for Process Hacker is that you get to choose what color you want for things so that it's easier for you to find. And as an example of that, I'm just going to say you can change, like, let's say your own processes to color yellow. You can put system processes in blue, and then you can change like elevator processes to orange, or however you want. It's pretty easy to customize your columns, and that way you display whatever you want in the order you want to see it. Excuse me. Give me one sec. Okay, so it also shows you the start time of the processes. That helps you narrow down what happens first. You can also use other things such as like the PID. If you hover over it, you can actually see more information about them. Whereas if you just get the number, and then the CPU, that'll be like the usage percentage. So it kind of helps you see how much it's actually using. So it helps narrow things down for you. Now it also has other tabs. We have services, network, and disk. Each of the last two shows more information about the processes with regarding to their network and their disk usage respectively. The service tab shows the full list of present services and drivers. There's also a log where you can see the timestamp of everything that happened, although I don't have a print screen of that. All right, now let's swap over to Fiddler. This tool helps identify the malicious domain. Every time that your browser navigates to a website, it will produce a particular URL. And the web server will return a response with the page that you asked for. Now, this request response workflow is what we call a web session in Fiddler. And each session is represented by a row in the web session list. Fiddler uses the standard columns, but you can edit to customize. And it also makes it easy because it contains the number sign at the top left. That way you can sort each session by chronological order. And you see, I highlighted some stuff for you in green. It's not all the malicious stuff, but just to make it easier for you guys to spot. This is also Fiddler. Now, while most people might use Fiddler to view web traffic or to find URLs being requested, it's quite a broad tool. There's a whole new world beyond if you're interested in learning more about the code that goes through your browser. So by default, Fiddler's tab section is on the right-hand side, and it gives you more information on the web sessions. But we're going to focus on the inspector tabs because it's the most relevant to our needs at this time. When you highlight a particular web session, the inspector tabs is divided into two. We have the request at the top and the response at the bottom. And it will give you information about the client, the user agent, the request type, if it's a GET or POST or whatever it is, as well as other parameters such as compression, encoding, cookies, etc. The web server response will include, the content type, the length of the response body. Some of them reveal the operating system. This one did. Based on the content type, you can also change it. You can use raw, or let's say if you're dealing with an image, you can change it to image view, or if it's an executable, you can use hex. So it's a really nice tool, and it helps you out. Now, if you look at the print screen, I didn't highlight it, but there's a zip file and the name of a file in the middle. You can see it right there. So it helps you narrow things down. It helps you decode. Very nice tool. All right, we have PE Studio. This tool allowed for us to have an antivirus scan reputation to confirm that it was malicious. We were able to identify the associated library for it. Now, if you look at the print screen, you can see the malicious DLL in the first window under library. And on the second window, you can see the blacklisted attributes from the malware assessment. It will contain under group what it is, if it's an execution, a file, a resource. Now, under value, you will see that we got set process shutdown parameters. We have post thread message, and we have NT set information process. Now, one of the nice things is that this tool has VirusTotal integration, which is pretty nice. VirusTotal will inspect items with many antivirus scanners and URL domain blacklisting services. Any user can select a file from their computer using the browser and just send it to VirusTotal. And VirusTotal will do an analysis on it. It will keep track of how many have been submitted and that kind of stuff. So it will provide the scan reputation for you. This is another PE Studio slide. You're able to see the virus total integration and how it will highlight malicious code or content in red. It will also tell you what organizations have it marked as malicious and the name that they have given it. So it does change there as far as name wise. It also has something that I find kind of nice, which is the date. That way you know when it was first added to their database. Now, not sure how well you can see this because it's kind of small. But if you look at the bottom of the screen, there's also a hash for the malicious file. So you can always enter those or save those and look for them in other systems. Anyways, there's many other helpful tools that you can use for security purposes. For example, this is PowerShell, and you can use it to see what content was downloaded from sites that have been visited by a certain user. There's a Notepad++. This is a text and source code editor for Windows. It supports tabbed editing, so which means that you can open multiple tabs in a single window. So it's fairly handy, and it can be used for all sorts of scenarios. So for this investigation, we utilized it for checking one of the HTML files, which is ads.htm. Now, as you can see on that first box, it has content equals no index, no follow, which in turn means do not show this page in the search results and do not follow the links on this page. Now, we also notice that it has name equals robots. So this robots meta tag in the example instructs the search engine not to show the page in the search results. So obviously, this is fairly fishy and stuff we want to notice on our analysis. All right, so now that we've gone through the analysis of this malware, you'll be able to follow the timeline and make more sense of all the indicators of compromise. Now, while Pony is often used alongside more sophisticated tricks, best cybersecurity practices will be to help keep individuals and businesses safe in most circumstances. One of the keys for both personal and business security is to make sure that everybody's aware of phishing techniques. As this case, one of the vectors is emails, and it will help ensure that employees are taking this and other aspects of security seriously. It's also crucial that you have antivirus programs, web browsers, well, pretty much everything kept to date. That way you can detect the latest malware and have the latest patches. Firewalls are also a good thing. They should be in place and try to keep the network perimeter secure. For Pony, it's good to have two-factor authentication. It'll help keeping Pony at bay. While it may still be able to crack some passwords, it won't have access to the second factor. So that'll help stop the progress on the attack. On top of this, you should always make sure that the passwords are long, contain significant amounts of entropy, and they will help prevent Pony from being able to brute force its way through in the first place. As far as recommendations, if you ever have this on your network, might be a good idea to take it offline and re-image it. It's probably the safest bet. Sometimes a scan is not good enough, so just to be erring on the side of caution, it's good practice. All right, so during this presentation, we focus mostly on the detection and analysis portion, but afterwards, it's important not to forget the remaining phases. So for example, phase 3, which is containment. The primary purpose of this is to limit the damage and prevent any further damage from happening. We have eradication, which will be the actual removal and restoration of affected systems. As with each of those, documentation is still necessary to determine the cost of man hours and any other resources as a mean to determine the overall impact to an organization. Recovery, which is to bring back the affected systems into production, but you need to be really careful just to make sure that it will not lead into another incident. It's essential to test, monitor, and validate these systems being back in production. That way they're not reinfected by malware or any other means. And we have phase 4, which is the post-incident, which is the biggest purpose is to complete the documentation that was not done during the incident, as well as any additional documentation that might be beneficial for future incidents. And that's all we got for you guys today. I will hand it back to Caleb.
Thanks, Luis. We appreciate the presentation there. So now we'll move into the question and answer part of the webinar. As one of the first questions we received, it's asking if, from Datashield's perspective on the content team, how we would detect this type of threat. So a few things there. One is our content team leads our threat intelligence program. So we are constantly updating that with the latest IOCs from various threat feeds and manual proactive looking by our threat intelligence team. So, as these IOCs constantly change for this particular malware variant and others, likely on the host side in terms of file hashes typically, and then also on the network side with IP addresses and domains, it would allow us to catch that type of activity. Also, we have more behavioral-based detections. So when the file initially is dropped onto the machine with the binary or executable, that is, one factor that our host-based detections would possibly alert on. And then the beaconing activity with it reaching out to the command and control servers is, additional activity on the network side. So we have detections on the host and network side that would catch that type of thing and look for different points of visibility from Windows event logs, packets, firewall logs, DNS logs, and additional things such as that. As a follow-up question to that, we were asked, how would Datashield handle an incident if a customer was impacted by this? The first thing we would do is kind of scope out the incident. So, this was likely the initial machine that was impacted where, that binary executed and we began to see, network traffic to the command and control server or multiple servers in some instances. And from there, we would look to see if there were, maybe if it was a phishing email, any other recipients of that email that were also seeing that similar beaconing activity from, or any of the host-based indicators, and scoping the incident. Also, depending on when we detected the threat, we would also always want to ensure to look for lateral movement and privilege escalation to see if the threat actor had moved to other devices within the environment, or they possibly compromised a better account, especially if it was an administrator or privileged account. And once we properly scoped the incident, then we could move into containment and working with the customer throughout that scoping and containment process to ensure that, what's recommended and the actions taken completely contain the threat actor in that incident in terms of this specific malware variant. And then working with the customer from a remediation perspective and ensuring that that's followed through. And then kind of from a lessons learned perspective from both sides, ensuring we had the proper visibility on the host and network side across the customer's environment, and also looking for other ways to improve maybe communication between the customer and Datashield and other things like that. And then Another question we received is, how have our incident response protocols evolved over the last year with us being remote, or has it, stayed the same for the most part? Thankfully, Datashield was based out of our Scottsdale, Arizona office before we were impacted by COVID-19 and shift to being remote. But we always had solid policies and communication plans in place to ensure that we had the proper coverage and that all of the analysts and different teams were communicating with each other. There's really been no negative impact as a result of that. One thing to note is, as the threat actors have changed and kind of from a TTP, so tactics, techniques, and procedures, and continue to adapt our incident response protocols and procedures that were always changing with that. But thankfully, we were not impacted by COVID-19 too much in transitioning to being remote. So that is all the questions that we'll go over today due to the sake of time. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up, but we appreciate all of the attendees today. And shortly after the webinar, you should be receiving a link to the recording if you would like to view it after. And thanks again for attending, and have a good rest of your day.